Yeah.
Other things.
Sorry, it's the particulate matter out there.
It is.
I think we should, think we should put a
I think
tariff.
it's the cane in there.
We should put a tariff on smoke.
You're just not used to the Hudson air?
I thought he was gonna jump on that.
I want a tariff on smoke.
Okay, all right.
All right, I'm
Work.
gaveling. I don't have one, but I'm gonna use my baritone to gavel. Welcome to the August Housing Task Force meeting. Good to see everybody. Hope their summers were going well. We're gonna throw out the agenda a little bit. I had a text from one of our advisory members immediately before the meeting started, who would like to take over a little bit of time. So Adam Bosch is here from Pattern for Progress.
Welcome, Adam.
Hey, everybody.
It couldn't have been fortuitous because your report came out today and we can
Yes.
show this group that we had you to here we insisted you come to deliver it.
You can't see it, but everyone in the room has a printout of.
Oh, wow. Oh, look at that. Oh, wow. I
Okay.
just saw 3 of them pop up on my
cut down
screen.
It's in my
File.
computer too, but I didn't get to read it yet, so.
That was like a bad edition of Hollywood Squares, what I just saw, when 3 people held them up all at the same time. So I don't like Chris's use of the verb take over. I'm not trying to take over, but I did want to just perhaps describe three things that have relevance to Columbia County real quick to all of you. So yes, our annual report on housing affordability in the region came out today. I keep putting together these reports and hoping that we'll have good news to share, but you know, the market is just making it not so. So you'll see in the report there today, you know, costs continue to outpace wages in pretty much every county. In Columbia County in particular, the rent gap, that's the gap between sort of what people could afford at 30% of their wages versus what exists in the market. That gap doubled for you guys, you know, more or less over the past 2 or 3 years. Year over year, just the 2 most recent years, renter wages up 5%, fair market rent up 13%. So even just there on a proportional basis, you know, rents outpacing proportionally wages by more than double. And then, you know, the one that continues to just confound me is the degree to which home ownership is really running away from people who do not currently own a home. And so when you see that in Columbia County, the amount of mortgage that your median earning family could access on a 2-person household falls short by about $222,000 for what the typical home on the market is going for. And then for a 4-person family, which again is a mature family, we're talking about, you know, 2 parents and 2 kids, or 2 spouses with a kid and a grandparent in the house. When you see that even the 4-person household is falling $137,000 short of being able to get enough mortgage for a home, that's a big gap. I mean, that's a big gap for our rural counties, especially, you know, our Columbia's, Greens, our Sullivans, our Northern Dutchess and Ulsters. That's a big gap. So we continue to watch this. The one thing I'll point out is we are seeing some subtle shifts in some of the market reports, including the last one we put out. In the last market report we put out, again, you guys were an outlier in the fact that you jumped again by many more dollars than most counties. But in that report, we did see for the first time in 7 years that we had 2 consecutive quarters of increasing inventory on the market. And the data don't tell us why that is. We have some educated guesses about why that might be, including more folks in the baby boomer generation retiring, looking to move on, putting their homes on the market. There is some potential indication that many of the folks from New York City who moved up during the pandemic, a certain proportion of them may be putting their homes on the market and looking to go back. But it's the first time in 7 years we saw 2 consecutive quarters where we had a jump in inventory in the market. It's modest jump, but whenever you see something for the first time in 7 years, it causes you to pause. And then the other thing we saw was 3 of the counties that really led the charge on prices skyrocketing, Dutchess, Ulster, Rockland, all saw their prices flatten out, plateau. We have also not seen that. You did not plateau. I think you were up by another $40,000 actually on the median. But we're watching that carefully because it's early signs of a potential shift in the housing market. We'll continue to report out on that. Second thing I wanted to share real quick was As you are aware, we are doing a pilot project in New Lebanon with the Hudson Valley Alliance for Housing and Conservation, where we're trying to help communities understand that land conservation and housing are not mutually exclusive, but they're actually two ingredients that go into healthy, active, vibrant communities. And in New Lebanon in May, we had a community conversation. About 65 people attended. It was really great. About priorities for conservation, priority sites for housing, housing needs. And we wrapped that up in a report that we sent back to the community just about a week ago. And next stage there is we're going to be getting together with the committee in New Lebanon to go through probably about 30 different sites and strategies that we heard back from the community and pick the top 6 to 10 and begin really putting deep strategy into those. And the reason I'm excited about this is one of the things we've seen happening at Pattern recently is we've been getting a lot more outreach from rural communities. And that outreach to us has been very, very similar. I can sum it up in one sentence. What about us? They are watching development happen in our small cities, in our villages, in the towns along our highway corridors. But many of our rural communities that have the same housing needs at scale to those other places are seeing that the developers are not coming their way, the housing solutions are not coming their way. They don't have the money and the technical know-how to kind of move on some things that they might do to help themselves. So we've gotten probably about 6 calls in the past 8 weeks from deeply rural towns in our region asking the what about us question. And we've been trying to provide some assistance and advice where we can, and in places where we're doing comp plans or other things where we're trying to dive deeper with those communities. So sharing that update on New Lebanon. Last thing I'll share before I be quiet and answer any questions you might have is we're very fortunate at Pattern. We earned a data sort of like a data investigation grant from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. This was part of a nationwide competition. They received more than 1,900 applications. They only made 30 awards, and we were fortunate to be one of the 30. This award that we got is going to allow us to create the region's first ever database and investigation on corporate home ownership, investor owned small housing stock between 1 and 4 families in size. And you may have read about this, you may have heard about this. There has been some anecdotal evidence that large corporations, large investment groups have been pushing up into the Hudson Valley and buying large portfolios of single family homes, even 2-family homes in some cases. There was a podcast about this happening in Newburgh. There's been some other anecdotal evidence. The governor included something about this in the budget that was passed by the state legislature this year that bars corporations from bidding on homes for the first 75 days that they're listed. And corporations in the law were defined as owning 10 or more parcels or 10 or more homes or more than $50 million under management. So what we're going to be, but let me back up. That law was passed without any statistical knowledge of how many corporately owned homes we have in the region or in the state. No knowledge at all about what the trend lines look like. Is this something that's on the rise? Is it something that's waning? Is it something that's steadily happening? And no sense of how many of these corporately owned homes are for the purpose of short-term rental versus long-term rental. And so we were actually able to broker a partnership with some very powerful data nerds from Massachusetts. I mean that with peace and love. That's an honorific, not a slight. And these folks have built and have access to a nationwide database of parcel ownership and a nationwide database of LLCs that trace every shell corporation back to their common corporate parent. So one of the things that makes this very difficult is when you have houses that are owned by LLCs, it's very, very challenging. If you think of it like branches coming to a trunk, it's very difficult to trace those corporate paper companies back to a common corporate parent. We now have the ability to do that through this project. So we are going to be doing this in 5 counties: Orange County, Ulster County, Dutchess County, Sullivan County, and Columbia County. Those are the 5 counties we're gonna be doing. And we are seeking some funding because we would really like to add Greene County. We think, especially in the context of short-term rentals, I think there's really high likelihood we would see some dense ownership in Greene County. We'd like to try to add Rockland as well. We're working on that now. But let me just explain, and then I'll be quiet. I'll explain what's going to come of this. We are going to have a map that shows all the corporately owned, investor-owned homes throughout the region. And then we're working with a special company called Inside Airbnb that uses a process called IP bouncing or IP scraping. That's going to be able to show us the location of every short-term rental within 1,000 feet of where that rental home exists across that 5-county region. We'll be able to overlay the short-term rental on top of the corporate database, and we'll be able to show how many of the corporately owned homes are for the purpose of long-term rental, like renting it to a family who lives and works here, versus short-term rental. We'll also be able to see the trajectory over time. We're using sales data to be able to show how many of those homes were purchased by corporate actors in the past 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. We can see the rate of change over time. So that project has started. Some of the preliminary data gathering should be done around the end of the month. We're going to provide a preview of our findings on October 14th at our Pattern for Progress Annual Housing Conference, which we're going to host this year at SUNY New Paltz, which will be good. And then the report will be done around the end of the year. As part of the report, after the data gathering is done, we are going to host some public input sessions where we find particularly dense corporately owned housing. We've promised to do them in the urban areas of Newburgh, Poughkeepsie, Kingston, and Hudson. Four that we guaranteed, and then we're going to choose some rural areas as well. So that's all I have to share. Sorry for taking up so much time.
Does anybody have any questions? I have one question.
Thank you. The scanning you're doing for short-term rentals, are you only gonna cross-reference the short-term rentals with the corporate, or would we have data that, like, we could reference short-term rentals versus rentals that are actually registered?
I'm going to check with our data partner there, but I think in order to do the project, we're going to have the data on every short-term rental, whether it's corporately owned or not. And then what we're going to do is cross-reference the two databases so that in the final product, we'll focus on the corporate ones, but we'll have in hand the data for all short-term rentals in those 5 counties, regardless of whether they meet the threshold of being corporately owned or not, which for us, we're going to use the same threshold that was codified in state law this year as 10 or more, just so that we're not speaking a different language than current law is speaking in New York.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
So Adam, I don't know, many counties have a registration process, but Columbia County is in process of implementing a registration process.
Mhm.
So we could probably supply data from our treasurer's office that would give you the list of all of the owners that have registered for short-term rentals in Columbia County.
Great. Yeah, and that's, we're able to bring that in if you want to share with us and just cross-reference that with the data sources that we're collecting from. It never hurts to have a belt and suspenders approach when you're dealing with data.
Adam, is there a definition of the homes that you're studying? I'm wondering if they're going to include manufactured housing communities in the study.
So Chris, well, this has been the subject of some discussion among the internal technical team, and I don't think we've settled on a decision yet. I think what we're leaning toward is including all homes that are between 1 and 4 units. And just to follow the tax law, anything above 4 gets taxed as as corporate or reviewed as corporate, not corporate, commercial, excuse me. It gets taxed as a commercial entity. So I think we're going to collect the data on all parcels that contain a residential property between 1 and 4 units, just so that, again, we're trying to do this in a way that conforms with existing law and existing tax codes, so that when we go to present it, we're not speaking a different language than kind of the rules that everybody's used to.
So when you're looking at these, you were just discussing in terms of the manufactured homes, would you have the ability to break out the overall inventory as distinct from the manufactured homes?
So it's a good question that I'll bring back to the team because, right, we have a few different ownership models for manufactured home parks, right? You have folks who own their manufactured home and the land underneath. You have folks who just own the manufacturer and they lease the land from some sort of owner, right? So, I mean, that's what you're getting at, right?
I'm not sure what Chris's point was, but I guess.
Adam's question is the difference between if you own a manufactured home and you own your own lot, right? So say you got a manufactured home that was constructed on an acre of land versus you own a manufactured home, mobile home in a park, so you're paying rent, you're paying your ground lease, but you own the home. I guess what I was trying to get at there, Adam, was the proliferation of corporations buying manufactured housing communities across the country. Specifically Warren Buffett buying up quite a few of them.
So that'll pop up in our study because something we're doing that's different from what the state did is I'm speaking a little out of school here, but I think the way the state law was crafted, it was, 10 or more properties in New York. We're bouncing this all against a national parcel data ownership database. So, we'll be able to see all that sort of stuff. I mean, for instance, we found one community in our region already that has 117 homes under management by a subsidiary of Fidelity. So, I mean, there's some real interesting stuff that's coming. We've only looked at 1 or 2 counties so far. But if there is an entity in this region that owns a manufactured home park that owns, I'm making this up, 25 others across the country, we will find it and we will see it.
Will this account for homes that are owned by banks? Like if Wells Fargo had owned 30 homes, would that be accounted for or no?
Yes. So I mean,
Okay.
and then the one thing we have to be careful about there is, if there are foreclosures for non-payment of taxes or something where the bank owns it with the intent of putting it back out on the market for a local person to buy it, we do have to separate that out from those who own it for the purpose of essentially earning gains off of it and having it as part of a portfolio that's meant to earn gains, capital gains, essentially.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Thank you very much. We'll talk to you soon. Enjoy the rest of the summer, Al.
Thanks. I'm going to stick on for a little bit.
Okay, I'm gonna jump back up to the beginning of the agenda as we have been joined by our newest Housing Task Force member, recently appointed at the June Board of Supervisors meeting. Pastor Kim Singletary has joined the task force. Pastor Kim, you wanna unmute yourself, say hi, introduce yourself to folks who may or may not have met you?
Good afternoon. I appreciate being invited to be a part of this task force. Certainly, my experiences in the county as an assessor, as a property owner, as a pastor, I'm very well familiar with some of the challenges, perceived or real inequities in affordability. And as I spoke to you, Chris, to say that I'm very concerned about what is happening with elderly and senior citizens, as well as disabled adults who are being priced out of their homes and apartments. So really hoping to find information that I can share with my colleagues and those who I serve, as well as add whatever I can to the success of this task force in helping to make housing in our communities accessible, affordable, and safe. So thank you again for inviting me and welcoming me to the task force.
Thank you, glad to have you. I, for one, am, and I think the co-chairs, I've spoken about this a few times, of all the perspectives represented at the table at the task force meetings, I felt like we were missing a senior housing perspective for a while. So I'm thrilled to have Pastor Kim up to speak from them, POV. Okay, I'm going to move on to pro-housing communities, flurry of activity over the past 4 weeks. There was the CFA that came out from Empire State Development, the Consolidated Funding Application, which is a variety of grant programs. Many of them now are gated behind pro-housing community certification. So we made a real push to get as many of our communities, at least getting all of their information in by the CFA deadline, which would fulfill the obligation. We are now at 21 of 23 of our communities that have submitted all the data, working with the last two. And we are now at 13 communities that are certified. I will say, much to my eternal chagrin, Westchester is now ahead of us. So they have 16 certified communities. You might ask yourself, well, how many municipalities does Westchester County have? 48 is the answer. Just happen to find out. So
How many employees do they have in the housing office?
Right.
So they have, Westchester's got 20 letters of intent in and 16 certifications, so they're at, do the math, it's 41.6% and 36% or 33%. For those two categories, we are at 100% letter of intent. About 94%, everyone's got their stuff in, and a little over half of, well, I'm sorry, yeah, 51% now, are now certified. Germantown and Greenport are the most recent, so those certifications just came through yesterday. I submitted so much stuff to HCR that there's probably going to be a bit of a lag time. We do know some of the data that they've reviewed. We've got 4 municipalities that need to pass the resolution. Stuyvesant, I don't think had to. Did you pass a resolution at the town board?
No, because we proved that we had already had the growth, I think.
Okay.
You know, documented that we're building it.
Yeah, so you
I
had
do need to
the,
give them updated information, though. They've been bugging me for
oh, yeah.
recertification information, and I haven't got there yet, but it's on my desk.
We we were notified that we were recertified, so I thought that meant we didn't have to do anything else. Do we have to do something
Oh,
else?
yeah, you're fine.
Okay.
But did you have to pass a resolution to the town board?
The first time,
Yeah.
The first time, okay.
not for
So-
the recert.
There's some precedent out there for it.
Yeah, I think it was like if you could generate a report that showed you how many homes you had built in the last 5 years or something, if we were able to do that.
Yeah, what they're looking for is a 1% increase in total in the past 3 years, or 1/3 of 1% each of the last. Yeah.
But to be fair, I think we just did belt and suspenders. We did the resolution and the report just to make sure we had.
I may have done a resolution too, but we had that report, so I
Right.
think that qualified us for.
So now that, we're past the deadline for the CFA programs that were tracked behind pro housing, but there's still quite a variety of grants out there. There's 650 million total in state funds attached to pro housing that 21 or 23 communities are now in the pipeline to access, and we'll wrap up the last two, I think, by the end of this month.
So why don't we stop for a minute and congratulate you on herding the cats and the mice.
Had I known that Chris would have helped, I would have waited, you know?
Yeah.
Where's Hudson
Me
in the
too.
mix?
I went out and did it
That's
first, and then he.
Done.
Hudson certified, yeah, Hudson was certified without my help. Michelle Tulo's on the
Did
call.
the job, Michelle, yeah.
Yeah, Michelle got that done. Michelle and Craig Haig and the team at City Hall.
Good job.
But the building departments have been, it's impossible to do this work without the building departments and the code enforcement departments throughout the county. They've all been tremendously helpful, and really, especially during this last push to get everyone in by the 31st, incredibly responsive. Even the departments that work maybe 3 hours, that have office hours, 3 hours a week, because they're out in the field the rest of the time. So I was really, really happy for the response, and we're close to being at 100%.
Having a good software program makes all the difference for the buildings,
It
right?
really does, it really does. So that's pro housing. Workforce survey, because of the pro housing push, I'm gonna, the good news, bad news, well, it's not bad news, it's just later news. The workforce survey should be released or out in the wild by the end of this month. I really want to get ahead of back to school and still be in the summertime. So I think the 4th week of August is when I'm looking to at least get that out there into the world, then try to collect the results for about 6 to 8 weeks or so.
We do have to acknowledge that Hudson Development Corporation called us, and we were working with them because they put out a survey. And it was it's very difficult to get results, so we do have to keep thinking about how we supplement the initial wave of survey applications out there, because everyone, I know I get through half a survey and I don't like a question, so I bail out.
Yeah.
Yeah, survey fatigue is Real.
It's real.
Yeah.
I'm going to switch these next two in the order. I want to leave some time for number 4 here. Community Housing Fund. So this was a piece of legislation that we had talked about earlier in the year that came out of Assembly Member Barrett's office. Ended up having, I believe, 8 sponsors on the Assembly side, and then the Senate version of the bill had 2 sponsors. It did not pass this session. It is going to come back the next session. So the group that Adam mentioned earlier, the Hudson Valley Alliance for Conservation and Affordable Housing, there's a policy working group within that alliance that's really kind of taken the lead on making suggestions to the Assembly member's office about potential tweaks to the legislation. So the first go around of this, what we'll call version 1. So in that situation, and let me give a backup for a broader context of this. This is a transfer fee. I don't like to use the word tax, but I also don't like to prevaricate. So whatever word works for you, you know what we're talking about here. It's some additional money that gets added on to conveyance of real property. This basically, it attaches that fee to conveyances of different price points, and we'll talk about what those differences are. That goes into a fund that can only be used for housing. The state legislation actually mandates that it's used specifically for housing, and then breaks out what that means, what you can use it for. The initial version of this, the way it worked was the buyer paid the fee. That was part 1. Part 2 was this fee was applied to any conveyance of real property over $500. So pretty much any sale would have to pay this fee. And it capped the fee at 1/2 of 1%. So there are a couple of reasons that this didn't happen at the state level. There are some tweaks that were suggested from, ostensibly either side of the aisle. So what the policy working group now is looking at is having, instead of the buyer paying, the seller pays. Instead of having this cutoff of $500, which that was news to me, I assumed that it was the cutoff that they're now going towards, which is median home sales price. The idea here is that the fee is meant to offset the unintended consequence, the negative externality of, whenever a home sells for more than the median home sales price, the comps that realtors use are all going to be a little bit higher, and you kind of get this escalation of home sale prices over time. So they've switched this now to seller pays the fee, and they've switched it to the median home sales price is the cutoff for what gets applied. So basically it would be the delta. So in Columbia County, we're close enough to a $500,000 median home sales price that we can use that as the round number. So if someone were to buy a home for $600,000, only the $100,000 would be would have a fee applied to it, and then that fee would be some percentage. So the initial version of this was 1/2 of 1%. So in that instance, it would be 1% for the 100,000, which is 1,000, and then half of that. So it'd be a $500 fee that gets added to a $600,000 transaction. There's some conversation now, is that percentage, if you're not going to be applying the fee to every transaction, is that percentage too small? Right, so if you run the numbers on, however many sales you have over the median home sales price, and then you append this 0.5% or 1/4% in some cases fee to those deltas, what are you actually generating? In Columbia County, if this existed last year using 1/4%, and it was only on conveyances over the median home sales price, it would have brought in about a little over $300,000. So there's some question of, do we increase that fee? Are you going to be able to create a community housing fund that actually can make an impact at that level? So those are the questions right now. I know this is one piece of legislation that will certainly come back. The other thing that came out of Assembly Member Barrett's office was kind of colloquially called the Habitat Bill. So that was for homes that were sold by a nonprofit to an income qualifying household that was at less than 80% of AMI, how that property is assessed or how it's valued, I believe. It changes or can change. These are both opt-ins. Neither of these are mandates. These are basically the state saying, here's a program like many of the other tax abatement programs that they have that localities can buy into. It should go back to the community housing fund because there is one very big change in the strategy. Initially, the idea here was that legislation would apply statewide. And I think that was probably the biggest piece of pushback at the legislature, that they didn't want it to apply statewide. They wanted it to be a little bit more directed. So right now, the policy working group is thinking of 2 potential ways to go about that. One is just the counties of the Mid-Hudson Valley region, because we are the most impacted by the affordability crisis. The other is to means test it. And two, there are metrics out there that really only our 8 of the 9 counties that Pattern serves, Putnam misses it by a little bit, and then Saratoga County all fit into this one metric that they could use to basically build a rubric. If you hit this metric, now your county is eligible to opt into this program.
Did you have to opt in? It's not where they
It's all-
mandate it, and you have to
yeah.
opt out.
No, it's opt in, yeah.
So we're just pushing the goalpost down farther for people to be able to afford something, because I'm gonna raise the price. It's just like the tariffs that are occurring. I'm just gonna raise the price. The only thing is now the county will make you more money because I've raised the price, so now you're gonna get more on the mortgage tax
Except people are,
because you're not
Finance.
separating it out.
people are paying cash now, they're not financing.
And that's another problem. I mean, I just heard, believe it or not, over in Chatham, 9 acres sold for $60,000 with a house on.
I think we're 60,000.
I can tell you where it was later, but I mean, it's just, there's still some.
Yeah, I mean,
But it's just, it sounds like a great thing, and I'll come around to understand that we need to do something. But it's just to slap it on there without looking at the
I
ramifications.
think that's why they were moving it to above the average.
Yeah, I mean,
price.
that's.
And then
right,
what
it's
is
like,
to the seller, to the buyer pays it as opposed to the
what
seller
difference
pays.
does it make?
well, I think this is one of those things where if you just hear it,
buyer,
right, the
okay.
way I just described it, if you just hear it, you immediately say, well, the seller's just gonna raise the price to offset that. It's like,
Sure.
okay, but what are you actually talking about, right? So if it's a $600,000 home and they raise it by 1%, that means the buyer's paying an extra $6,000. They're probably gonna be able to swing that. Not that nobody has no sympathy for an extra $6,000 in a home sales price, but I think that the cost and the benefit there, I think kind of your fears get allayed a little bit once you actually start to
I
work out.
do like the fact that it's legislated that it's specifically for that, because now this whole thing with the short-term rental with taxes and stuff like that, it's just.
Who manages it?
The community housing fund, you would basically have to set up a board. The city of Hudson has a housing trust fund, so it works similar to that. You've got a board that manages the expenditures, manages the administration.
What is
Yep.
the tax, Chatham collects, I think they're the only town in the county that collects a real estate tax for
Yeah, so
housing.
they've got I don't know if they've passed it, yes, is Supervisor Collins is not on? So they have a community
They tell me they're collecting money, so they're.
Yeah, so they have community preservation
That's what
funds,
it's called.
which the community housing fund legislation is based on. It's almost the same exact model, you're just using the fund for.
So they would probably not opt in because they already have this other mechanism. It would be an either or mechanism, right?
It's county, right?
It's not town by town,
County.
countywide.
It's countywide, okay, I
That's,
didn't understand
that's
that, okay.
Adam, did you have?
Yeah, just real quick. So there's, the thing I want to share, there's 4 towns on Long Island that have this. They were subject to special legislation a few years ago. One of the council members from one of those towns is going to be at our housing conference this year to describe how this community housing fund is working in their town. And one of the things that she harps on is one of the questions here, which is they didn't realize how difficult this was going to be to manage. So they did actually have to add an employee to their town to manage this, manage the proceeds of the fund, but also that they're running 3 or 4 programs off of the real estate transfer fees that they've collected. They've collected about $2.5 million in 2 years. And, she'll be there to explain their approach to this. I would just say, add on what Chris says, because I've been part of these discussions with the realtors and with others on the policy group. This is by no means a guarantee. This is going to be a little bit of an uphill slog if the legislature chooses, to pursue it again. There are not only the headwinds, in terms of the realtors being against it, but there's also some people in the legislature who are simply philosophically against handing down additional taxing jurisdiction to localities. So, this is not, we shouldn't be thinking by any means that this is like gonna happen next year. It's not that cut and dry.
It still has the local option of, that you have to opt in, and the
Right.
communities might decide not to.
Yep.
For $300,000,
Because.
What would you do with it?
The money, okay, so you set up the group that's gonna manage it. Are they then in conflict with the land bank group that's already set up looking for projects? I mean, what are they? What type of things do they look for? They
I mean,
look for
it's
projects.
so on Long Island, so it's town by town, it's not a county, I mean, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, it's not a county real estate trust, so it's collected or dispersed town by town. What they've done on Long Island is they've done a couple things, they've done land acquisition. So we've heard about this in many rural towns, hey, if we just had control of some land, we could use the RFEI process to put it out there to developers and get exactly what we know our public needs. So they've used it for land acquisition, then they put that land out through an RFEI. They've used it similar to a housing trust fund to supplement capital gaps in construction projects. On Long Island, they've also used it for what they're calling enhanced down payment assistance. So if the current down payment assistance provide X amount of money for those making below a certain amount of wages, they're providing additional money or providing money to folks who make just in that gray area beyond that threshold, but still can't put together enough money for down payment. So they're using it for a couple different programs to help housing from a few different angles, ownership, rental, construction, and land acquisition.
Yeah, I think it's best to think of the land bank as it's an entity, but it's also a program, and then this is just a pot of money. Right, and then you figure out what you wanna do with that pot of money.
Right, but the pot of money could end up being in conflict with, like you said, acquiring property. What if the
Well, I
language says we'll acquire property, meantime, the land bank group has been eyeing a piece that's up for foreclosure, and the other group knew
Would there be,
Yeah, one
Well,
guy-
I've got-
couldn't they give money for the land bank for that
Yeah.
purpose? Right.
Yeah, they could fund the land bank, I
For
would
that
think,
purpose.
so. Adam, I think to your point of who collects this and who distributes it, my understanding is that wherever deeds are filed, so if you're filing the deed at the county level, that's how the fee works. So if the county was the ultimate. This is getting a little ahead, but if the county was, kind of the top of the ticket as far as collecting this money and dispersing it. And the county essentially is running the land bank, I would imagine that they'd figure out a way to work together and not be.
Yeah, I
in
mean,
conflict.
that's a detail we'd have to dig into because that's certainly not how the CPFs work. I mean, those are town specific, so. I think that's a detail we'll have to dig into more.
But you said, Adam, one of the groups, at least one on Long Island, manages their own programs with it, as a separate function of their activity.
Yeah, I think the one who's coming to our conference is Southold, town of Southold.
Yeah, I think one of the big ones down there was, it might have been the first, was Peconic Bay. And I believe they started there specifically to help their firefighters get housing. Because their firefighters don't live anywhere.
Yep.
Okay,
Thank you.
And those are smaller communities
those are for Long Island.
related, yeah, for Long Island, yeah.
So the biggest,
They're way out.
the biggest property news in the county in the past, well, little bit of time. I was gonna say the past month, but maybe even longer than that. Was just about a month ago today, almost, it hit the media that Galvin was donating some portion of their portfolio to Bard College. Some of the information that was out there has been refined over time, so I can kind of share what we know, just so everyone's got the same knowledge base. And there may be people in the room who know more than I do, or much more than I do. So our understanding is Galvin.
Just to preface this, our information is taken from 3 newspaper articles.
That's right.
We don't have,
Inside.
There's no, this is just,
Come on, I thought you guys had the inside scoop on.
so this is a compilation and an overview.
You're gonna have to ask Kamal.
So the understanding is that pretty much everything in Galvin's portfolio is a part of this, except for 3 properties. Then again, this is our understanding, and those properties are the 4th Street Hotel project, which is basically the block of 4th Street between Warren and State, so that includes what was Helsinki. Crosswinds, the apartments just right outside of town here, and then the tennis courts, which will be the community theater. So those 3 properties are not a part of the proposal.
The default lots or not?
Sorry?
And the default lots or not?
no, I think they were good.
They are.
We heard that they were,
Okay.
because they have a piece of equity in that with other partners.
The boundary, which is the third one,
Crosswinds,
which is Crossing.
right outside.
Next to the school, next to the elementary school.
Across from the fire, museum.
On the 7th. On the fire museum. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
So we think those three are off the table.
I think
Go ahead, Howard.
the bigger issue, I think, is, the CFO from Bard was in the paper saying, if you're interested in any of our properties, come and talk, and those properties, come and talk to us. And also, they have, 90 days to 6 months to reject any of the properties that were in the proposal. So, yeah, you're not gonna know for a while, but it could open up a number of opportunities. And it's hard to believe that Bard will retain all of them. A, because they're looking to sell some already, and B, they're not in the property management business, and C, it becomes unrelated business income for not-for-profit, and that is a complicated process as well, but they did need it to get the match for the grant. So it might not be an immediate sell-off, because if they can show the book value based on appraisals, until they actually sell them. I think if they can do it in an orderly fashion, it'll be okay, but if they dump them all in the market at the same time, it'd be crazy.
So Bard has said that they do not intend to use any of these buildings for student or faculty housing or for any kind of college programming whatsoever. There is a world, and it's likely that they don't accept every single one of these donations. So then the next most obvious question is, well, does Galvin still want to donate / sell those properties to another entity? That's an open question.
Like the city.
Very open question. So that I just want to put that out there, so everyone's got the same shared knowledge base. There are, a number of nonprofits have been knocking on Bard's door about what they might be able to do, either from an administrative side or just from a property disposition side.
This was something that our board asked for, and we basically took the 3 articles and cut and pasted them and put them in AI, and PowerPoint came out.
Yeah.
We don't have
Genius.
any units are involved.
You don't know how many housing units are involved.
Okay.
No, and it's a mix of, some of these properties are residential, some are commercial, some are community oriented, so it's a little bit of everybody.
Yeah, we've heard from a couple of community organizations, that have leases wondering what's gonna happen. And,
It's one of those, the library.
well,
The li-
no,
They still
not
own
for
the library?
profit, there's some not, yeah, they still own the library.
Okay.
Some of the concerns that I have about the situation is, what will happen to senior housing now? Galvin owns 3 senior housings in Columbia County. Got the, High Point in Chatham, along with Greenport, and we have Richardson Hall in Thurman. So my concerns would be what protections are there in there for these seniors who are already in senior housing? And another concern that I have is, will all of the properties that sold, particularly the city of Hudson, go to a free market rent rather than a fair market rent? And how will that affect our Section 8 people? And Section 8 already has a moratorium in Columbia County. They're taking applications, but they're not funding anything. And the other thing too, what about the Galvin Motel? How would that affect transitional housing? Those are some of the concerns I have.
I know that conversation is taking place, but there's no answer to that question, but there's,
No, but they are,
right.
Bard is sensitive to that. The Civic Motel is one of the few properties that they specifically named as, we are very aware of the situation here, we're sensitive to it. I don't think they would intend for, well, I don't want to speak for them, but
I would
they're
really
very
like
aware
to
of it.
know what protections are in there for the seniors in senior housing. I'm sure that some of the funding that may have come from grant money, there probably are some restrictions on those type of facilities, but we've got to really kind of look into that kind of thing.
Is there a way to do a little bit of a deep dive on this and see how many housing units are affected, whether they're protected, what protections, if any, might exist for them?
We have a list, that we took off the county tax rolls. And there were about 8 or 9 that we added because they weren't,
Oh, yes.
they weren't listed, as Galvin. There was different names. And there are about 85, and we did confirm in writing with Galvin that it included not only the, properties owned by their not-for-profit foundation, but also their for-profit businesses. I guess, the easiest way to do that, might not give us the number of units, but we certainly can look on the, when we download it, into Excel, the tax records, it does give you a classification of whether it's a commercial building or a residential building.
But we could extrapolate the units maybe from that.
Yeah,
Sure, drive by.
the cheating way to do that is
Yeah.
to pull each one up and see how many bathrooms they have.
One at a time.
Or kitchens. Usually kitchens will tell them.
Bill, with respect to the freeze of section 8, does that mean that the federal government's not authorized it anymore at Columbia County, or what does that mean?
Their funding is not there. Yeah.
So they're taking applications.
Yeah, I will check with them again, but last I heard, they're taking applications and they're establishing a list. But there is a moratorium on it.
Do we know what the list looks like?
Or make.
Do we know what the list looks like? Is it still in the 100?
I would say probably, you're talking, well, of course, with no funding, but, you're probably talking, I would say probably 2 years or better.
One report that relates to this, which is why I asked, is on July 31st, K&R Development out of New York City did close on Providence Hall and Skylar Court, which is 150 units of Section 8 that is 30 years old. And they purchased it, and the city IDA did give them financial incentives to do that in return for a commitment that it will remain a Section 8 project for 30 years. So, and there was some issues with respect to the sale due to some changes in state funding, where they would no longer allow the 4% tax credit projects to be spent on rehabs. It all had to be new. And there were some HUD regulations that delayed the closing because the underwriters weren't willing to accept the risk of what the regulation would ultimately say. The result was at one point, the owner, they were close to losing their option, and the owner was exploring opportunities to sell it to a market housing developer, and we would have lost 150 unit Section 8.
So the 4%, that's the tax low income.
They didn't use that ultimately. They had to come up with a whole new financial structure. But last January, right before it was supposed to close, the state summarily issued a press release that the 4% was no longer available for rehab or adaptive reuse, only for new build. But
Just for, as a point of information, any of the facilities that were financed with low income housing tax credits, HUD has said that rents can't go up more than 10%. But it doesn't have anything to do with your income. It's not income driven at all, so they don't even look at the income. So if your income can't handle a 10% increase over what the rent is now, chances are people will be evicted as well.
well, and some of the issues we've seen is if a project says that 80% of AMI are under, and when they take the rent and multiply it by 35 or 40 to do the credit check, people don't meet the test, even though they're under 80% of meeting.
So Bill, how many families or units are currently being served by Section 8 housing? So if the Section 8 housing, if the Section 8 funds were to evaporate, how many people would be at risk?
Well, the way I understand it, those that are being funded now will be funded. It's just new applications are not being funded.
But do we know how many that is?
I don't know.
Is there a way to find out?
I would think so. Yeah.
Should I ask, should I ask Commissioner Gibson? Would he?
Oh, you could, or I can go directly to Saratoga and maybe find that number
Do you mind?
for Columbia County. No,
That'd be very helpful.
sure.
Thank you.
Could you break it up?
I would like to,
Is- Hudson is done by the Hudson Housing Authority. Some by Saratoga, but Hudson Housing Authority does it. And Hudson Housing Authority will do anything within the 12534 zip code, which takes into other places, Stockport, Greenport, you know, any anyone who has, who is looking in an area, where they have a 12534 zip code, Hudson Housing Authority can do that.
Wow.
But you can also go through Saratoga Springs, which is the regional office.
Thank you.
Pastor King?
Okay, pardon me, Bill, I didn't mean to interrupt. I didn't realize you were still speaking. And, so I
Hey,
say hi. I didn't know that was you out there. I've been serving on the Fair Housing Advisory Board for over a decade, maybe close to two. And so I didn't get a chance to call you. I just found out I was appointed, Bill, but I'm glad to see you. Also want to acknowledge that it was a meeting with Supervisor Brenda Adams where I talked about a bill that I and some of my colleagues are working on. It's called the Senior Housing Protection and Stability Act. And we are going door to door getting signatures. We've dropped it off at a couple of senator offices, upstate and downstate. And one of the things when we're talking about, an organization like Galvin, owning several of the senior housing complexes in one particular community area, it would, if this bill were able to pass, and of course we know it's a process and change takes time, but what it seeks to do is to grandfather in senior citizens and elderly when properties change hands, there's new owners and developments, that the rents that when the properties change hands, the rent that it changed hands is at will remain the same up to 30% of their income, whichever is closer to their income in terms of increases in the rent. It would be capped at 30% for people who are 65 and older, as well as people who are 65 and older who move into an area where family members have lived for 15 or more years, that they can grandfather into that as well. There are some other things in it. I haven't been able to present it to Chris yet. I did give a copy of the bill to Supervisor Adams. She gave me some feedback as well. That's one of the things we'll be looking to work on and hopefully can add the task force and the fair housing boards as supporters of the bill. Also, there is the Faith in Action Housing bill that is being proposed. It went before the legislature in the last session, and it'll be back again. But this cuts through some of the red tape for faith organizations that hold properties that can be reconstructed or developed to provide housing. So this is when you talk about the funds for the community housing fund. In our bill, we talk about making some monies available for seniors to be able to go up a little more if they need to, in terms of meeting the rents that are increasing. It also includes making more housing available for seniors in our communities. I'm hoping to have more conversation about how we might include that in a potential community housing fund. But the Faith in Action Housing Act is something also that I want to share with the committee and send to Chris to see if that's something else that can work into what you're already talking about, what you're already envisioning and hoping is going to come down the pike in the near future. So again, thank you, Brenda, for thinking that this might be a good fit for me. And I'm just hoping that we can put some teeth behind protecting our seniors and our elders in their housing. I can tell you that as we go around door to door getting signatures, nobody refuses. And I hear people's stories. I already knew people's stories. I knew our own story, but to hear people's stories. So again, I think we're all on the same page. This is something that is important to all of us. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
Thank you. All right, the last little piece of update I've got, the vacant rental improvement program, we got some news on that. So this is, Rockville is administering this through 9 counties. They are still accepting applications. There are still slots open for this program. The preferred period is over, which is what we were in. So if there was a Columbia County applicant, they kind of had priority status. That window has closed. However, from their list, to Mike's point of for every 10 potential projects that you have, one happens. Same thing happens when you're a local program administrator and people are applying to your grant program. They can encourage people to keep applying because they haven't finished the due diligence on all the people that have applied so far. And there may be some applicants who drop out of the pool because they don't qualify for one metric or the other. So if there's anyone thinking about it that they can still apply. I've had a couple of conversations the past 2 weeks, people that were wondering if they should pull the trigger, and definitely should. The bad news on that is that there's another round of vacant rental improvement program grant money coming. Much like the ADU program, HCR has decided that if you are a community that participated in the previous round, can't participate in the next round. So this next round of funding, Columbia County residents won't be eligible for unless they change their minds, which could happen.
So have you had any feedback about credit issues becoming increasing more of a barrier because of recent the last couple of years, it's just been harder for people to pay their bills because of the gap between income and all their other expenses?
Yeah, I think it's been coming up more with the plus 180U program, because there you're talking about homeowners at a certain income level, right? You had to be at or below 100% of AMI for that, and I think they're running into much more credit issues on that side than they are in the vacant rental program. And now you're talking about, it may be your home, but it's much more likely to be just a property that you own. And I think the credit issues there are much less intense than they are on the homeowner side.
So I just want to circle back to one of the questions you were asking earlier about program. I'm not aware that we currently have a not-for-profit or their organization in Columbia County that is helping people clean their credit or clear their credit to prepare for home ownership. And so this is one of the things that might benefit from that. And, credit now is also considered as for employment. If you have a bad credit rating, you are not considered to be as eligible for employment. So I think it's an important thing to consider.
Chris, you had done that chart before, I think you'd shared it with this group, but if you could just explain again how you looked at those industry job median incomes and compared it to the 30%, and how many people in the county were income.
What's available?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that data point was, if you earned the median income, just county, and this is the jobs in the county, not people who live in the county but have jobs, it's just jobs in the county. So the median income for jobs in the county is about 55,000. At that income level, you can afford about 1,600 a month and not be housing cost burdened. And across the county, it actually went down. So I checked before this meeting, we were at 32 apartments that were 1,600 or below. We are now at 24 countywide, and there are about 700 jobs in the county that are at that median level. So you're talking about close to a about a 23-to-1 ratio of job holders versus, apartments that are available at that price point.
And in addition,
Even if you doubled up, you still have quite a few people.
the labor statistics that came out for July show that there's 800 people unemployed in the county. And we're at 3.2%. The only county in the region that was less than, the only county in the state that was less than us was Saratoga and Hamilton. But in Hamilton in July, they have a surge of jobs for the resort and mountain industries.
Michelle noted that Greater Promise neighborhood has worked with working credit.
So I mean, I don't want to rub salt in the wounds, but we had, I read a small house on my farm. We lost a tenant because his job was transferred. In the first hour on Facebook Marketplace, first 2 hours, we had 49 applications. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, we had 100. So we had to shut it down just
So you
before.
could get it rented.
50 times over. 50
How
times.
was their credit?
Well, I'm a little more lenient about that, but it's just amazing to me that by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you could have 100 applications for one house.
Michelle and I had a meeting with,
I lived in Columbia County, there are a lot of people, that's the trouble with Facebook is,
so
Oh, they were. We did check to see what their current residence was.
So we had a meeting with
Already.
a contractor last week who is putting up manufactured homes, a couple different sizes, and this is in Ravina, a place that has some housing, has infrastructure. Manufactured homes, 3 bedrooms, it was 1,800 square feet, so a pretty big house. He listed it, he sold it within an hour to somebody who never visited it, didn't even open the website really to look at the floor plan, bought it with cash for $420,000. Which was $50,000 above the asking price. This is a manufactured home. And it sold immediately, so I don't see for cash or like 20% above the asking price.
What are you gonna do with it, Chris?
Yeah.
They can't move to Galvin.
You can't work remotely, we're not allowed to
No, I-
work remotely.
That's all I've got, unless anybody's, or I'll open up to public comment, please, Peter and Joyce, good to see you. Nobody in the room?
I just think the survey is gonna be, I still find that this whole thing about what we really need, I mean, you talk to a lot of young people know the situation, but people don't settle into a house like they used to. Their house is just maintenance and that nowadays is expensive. So I think we can see the rentals would be more of the direction they go.
Oh, yeah, I don't think. There's a real dearth of rentals, right? That's what we're talking about, like, there's 24 rentals out there that people that are in the median wage can afford. But there's, there's some happy medium between, we don't have anywhere near enough rentals and everything that gets built is a 40-unit box. Right, so there's some happy medium in there, we're just trying to figure out how big that need is.
And I think you've seen the articles, particularly in the last week or two that were out there that, people who are in their homes and older don't want to give them up because if they sell it, they don't know where they're gonna move
Right.
or if they can afford where to move. So, and if they had low interest rates, when they refinanced 5 years ago, they're not gonna be putting their houses up until they go to the healthcare facility.
Still expensive. I'm a sole proprietor. And I just got another thing added to my unemployment tax, unemployment insurance. $25 per employee. Pitt Harrington lumber. That's crazy.
The cost, I mean, insurance costs of not just for contractors, but home insurance
I
as well.
pay $50 a year because I'm a Schedule C corporation. You know why I pay $50 a year? So they can check and make sure I haven't changed the name of my company. You know, I gotta ask, how long does it take somebody to do that? And $50 per Schedule C corporation throughout the state of New York?
The wise old loan officer told me that the honeymoon of homeownership is soon over.
All right, on that note.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the summer.